two concepts that a lot of people like to use, but more often not they don't understand, is volume and volatility. We're going to talk about volume and volatility, and I'm going to show you how to use these two tools to your advantage, not just in volume profiling, but in any trading. So what we're going to talk about firstly is volume. Now, remember what we said, volume is showing us, the how good or how successful the auction process is taking place. Don't forget, the objective of the market is to facilitate trade. So if there is a high amount of volume, the market's doing a good job. Why? Because it's facilitating buyers and sellers, or it's facilitating a high amount of trade. So firstly, remember, volume on its own means nothing. It tells us nothing. If you just look at volume, you have high volume, you have low volume. That does not tell us anything about future prices. Okay? We need to see the advertisement of prices with the volume to have any kind of meaningful information, but also to make an objective type statement. So high volume it means trade is being facilitated well. Low volume means there's a high probability for mean reversion. In other words, remember we said volume is like force. When there's a lot of force in the market, we should be seeing prices move aggressively up or aggressively down. Okay, if it's not moving aggressive, or if it is moving aggressively up and down but on lower volume, it's very likely that we're going to revisit those prices at some point. Why? Because it's not new business taking those prices up or down. So the fact that it's not new business means it's highly likely that we do retest those prices again at some point. Now note, volume is a relative tool, so it's all about understanding how volume is changing over a given period of time. So what I mean by that, if you're sitting, and let's take for example a weekly type strategy where the market's moving relatively sideways on lower volume. All of a sudden, on any given day, the market volume doubles what we've seen over the average of the last 10 trading sessions. This very aggressive relative change in volume is telling us that new business is being brought into the market. Now, that how it impacts prices is all determined on a number of factors like trade location and some of the where we are trading within a bracket and all sorts of things. So on its own, it doesn't mean something, but the fact that there's a strong relative change in volume, that is something we want to identify and pay attention to. Then, just some of the things I would use volume for and I'd pay attention to is, as you can see in the example provided, I've got two colors there. I've got a red line and an orange line on the volume bars. Now, that for me is showing what is relatively high or relatively low volume based on a previous number of sessions. And I identify that because it's easy for me to then see when all of a sudden, there's a high amount of volume or new business coming into the market. Equally, I have moving averages on the volume, so I can see how, on average, the volume is changing, and I can see if there's a sudden relative shift in volume. And then obviously the ranges that we see in terms of the volume. Sometimes volume will be sitting in, say, doing roughly 20,000 contracts every half hour for a number of half hours. So if you know what the average is and then the sudden shift, you can really quickly pick up on the shift in the relative change that is occurring within the volume. And more importantly, you can then develop strategies based on these relative changes. So to finish, remember, high relative volume is indicative of initiative being taken from the buyers or the sellers, which happen to be influential participants. So when you see a relatively strong shift in the volume, towards the upside, we can see a little bit of initiative coming into the market, and then we need to be cautious going against that initiative. And that is why we sort of talk a lot about volume quite extensively. Let's now have a look what we mean by volatility.